Hello, hello, good morning, good morning. How's everyone feeling this morning? Fantastic. Come on, it's a Saturday, we're at the Escape. How's everyone feeling this morning? All right, great. We've got a lot of great content today. Thank you all for joining us. We've got tons of great content for everyone looking to dive into the world of big data, sports analytics, and just the general world of analytics. Are you going to use the mic? Can everyone hear me?
You don't have the mic.
We've got some awesome content. Thank you all for being here. First and foremost, I want to thank the man behind the conference, Dr. Faisal Akawi. He's the Executive Director of Information Systems Programs at Northwestern University. He has a wild responsibility and burden of his job there, and thanks to his burning passion and drive, he's able to create a way for us to consume all this wonderful content in an entirely new way. I also want to thank the incredible list of sponsors today, and that includes everyone from Cloudera, Tableau, IBM, Salesforce, Microsoft, Kenway Consulting, Stats, Dragon Spears, and Metascale. So thanks again to all the sponsors. I also want to thank a couple of universities for their involvement. IIT, Northwestern University, and in particular Robert Morris for having us here today as well. We're able to take advantage of their great facilities. So that's really exciting. In addition, let's talk about why we're really here today. So today we're here to explore the future of data science. Like I said, there's great content from everyone ranging from beginners looking to break into the industry to experienced professionals looking to get that extra edge in their career in analytics and big data. We've got workshops for learning new skills and new tools in a hands-on way. But before that, we have a great keynote speaker to kick things off, and I'm honored to introduce him today. The keynote today is going to be about the really exciting and ever-growing world of sports analytics. And there's no better person to talk about sports analytics today than Alex Greer. Alex epitomizes sports analytics as an accomplished athlete himself. He was a top 100 rated high school baseball player. His career was unfortunately sidelined by injuries, but his passion for sports combined with his interest and knowledge in big data makes him the perfect speaker for today as a subject matter expert in sports analytics for Cloudera. He's most interested in and presents on applying Cloudera's vast experience in big data to help consumers collect data at their disposal to boost marketing revenue, create product enhancements, and improve on-field performance. He's also a UPenn grad, a diehard Dodgers and Lakers fan. He's from LA, and today is his first time in Chicago, so give him a warm welcome. He's the perfect person to kick off the events today. He brings a compelling vision of the top trends he sees in the space, bold predictions about where the future of the space is going, and examples of what he has seen. Before we bring him up, I want to bring your attention to the Twitter handle, @EscapeTech, where you can ask questions in real time while he's speaking that we'll address afterwards. And then throughout the conference, any comments or observations or anything that you want to share throughout the day, please use the hashtag #TheEscape. So please welcome Alex Greer.
All right, can everybody hear me? Yep. All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out this morning, taking your time at 9 a.m. on a Saturday to be here. I appreciate it. Gonna write 2 more hashtags up on the board. One is Be the Change. And the other one, Tom Miller, you're going to like this. We're starting a movement, Data R, A-R-E. Data is plural word, so we want to make sure that everybody catches on to that. I want to get a feel for the crowd here real quick. It's a Big Ten town, so I'm assuming we've got Ohio State and Michigan fans here? Not really? Let's see. I'm a big baseball guy, so Cubs fans? All right. What about the South Side Sox? All right. Any Brewers fans? Yes, this guy. All right, represent. You guys have been really fortunate in hockey lately, so Blackhawks? You're all bandwagon fans. Bears? All right. How'd we do in the draft? Good. Super Bowl bound? Awesome. Awesome. Well, this is going to be so much fun, you guys. This is a topic I'm really passionate about. I love big data and I love sports, so I'm so excited to share with you today some of the observations I've seen, what's happening in the marketplace currently, where sports and big data is going, and just cover a little bit about how we can go about accomplishing it and start bringing it into the sports marketplace today. So I wrote up here the hashtag Be the Change. I want that to be kind of the theme as you think about entering perhaps into the world of sports or something sports related. The maturity of data in sports is kind of all over the map. Different organizations have embraced it to a really high degree, and some of them still reject it entirely, even in 2016. The beauty of what you could bring to the sports marketplace is there's use cases that abound in all sorts of different businesses that you can apply directly to the sports industry. As I go through these slides and I describe what I'm seeing out there and where the future is going, I want you to think about, if you're a graduate student and you're looking to write a thesis paper, for example, or you're looking to do a startup in the field, I would encourage you to think about what's being presented, see what you're most passionate about, because that's what you're going to dedicate the most time to, and please go see Dr. Faisal Akawi, go see Dr. Tom Miller, present them with your idea. They'd love to hear about it. I'd love to hear about it too. So I want to cover briefly just where the sports landscape data has had an impact in the sports landscape. Statistics have been a big part of sports, particularly baseball, since the 19th century. This is what's called a box score. This was printed in 1876 for a game between the Boston Braves and the Philadelphia Athletics. Statistics in baseball is a really big deal, and it helped popularize record keeping and tracking data, even for people that were reading in newspapers and wanted to learn more about the game. Another key factor that became a big part of popular culture is the idea of milestones in sport. Again, tallies, particularly in baseball, but in other sports as well, like Will Chamberlain's 100 points, touchdown records in football. In baseball, numbers have a particular meaning, and there is no greater excitement than the home run, single individual home run chases in baseball. Everyone hear of Babe Ruth? All right. So Babe Ruth was known as the greatest home run hitter of all time, still considered one of the best. And he set the record for home runs in 1927 with 60 home runs. Then we come to 1961, New York Yankees again, Roger Maris. 61 home runs, but notice the asterisk. People were so in love with Babe Ruth that they hated to see this record shattered, right? And they put the asterisk in there because Babe Ruth did 60 home runs in 154 games. Roger Maris, in that year, they started playing seasons with 162 games. And he hit the 61st home run during that last period of 8 games. Now, do people remember the home run race of 1998? We're in Chicago, so Sammy Sosa was a big part of it, right? All right. That was a really exciting time. That home run race really made me fall in love with baseball that much more. But again, notice the asterisk I put. Okay. Now he hit all of those home runs. He broke 61 and got into 62 within 154 games. But come to find out years later that he was, juicing, right? He was taking performance-enhancing drugs. They weren't quite testing for it at nearly the same degree then as they are now. But that record is tarnished now because of the performance-enhancing drugs that he later admitted that he took. So again, an asterisk. And now here stands the current home run record with Barry Bonds, 73 home runs. So I just show this to demonstrate that even simple tallies and numbers have had a very deep meaning to sports fans. Can I take questions at the end? Oh, you good with that? All right, cool. Now, there's a new era of data analytics coming. In fact, a lot of it is already here. But the old guard, older generations of athletes and front office managers and scouts are resistant to this change. Goose Gossage is a Hall of Fame pitcher from the New York Yankees. And he came out with this quote during spring training this year. "The game is becoming a freaking joke because of the nerds who are running it." I'll tell you what's happened. These guys played rotisserie baseball at Harvard or wherever the F they went. And they think they figured the effing game out. They don't know bleep, right? But here's the reality is that sports, first and foremost, you have to remember sports is an entertainment industry, and there's a great deal of revenue involved. And when there's a great deal of revenue involved, there are going to be people that are going to try to maximize every competitive advantage they have, and that now includes heavily data analytics. Just to reiterate the point, let's take a look at the annual revenue of every league plus the teams combined in that league recently. NFL at $13 billion between the league and the teams. MLB at $9.5 billion. And then the English Premier League in England is the top earning soccer league and combination of teams in the world. But notice all of the other soccer or European football leagues in the world that are making a tremendous amount of money. Think also about how many teams and organizations there are out there. Just to put it in perspective, these are the Division I teams alone, 351 of them. So think about all of the other teams and leagues that are out there that are begging to gain a competitive advantage through data. So let's talk about how data is being leveraged today, how teams are going about it. Marketing, again, we were talking about sports being first and foremost an entertainment sport. Anything that these teams and leagues can do to drive additional revenue, they're looking for ways to do it. And one of the most effective ways to do it is understanding the customer, understanding their fan base. And there's a term for understanding this called customer 360 or customer journey. And what teams need to understand is they can collect so much more data than they're collecting right now about the fans that they have, the fans that are attending their games and watching it on TV. And if they want to be able to reach out to you, the individual fan, they need to understand trends across segments on a much more granular level. So you can take all of this data and then create individual insights about individual fans and start dedicating marketing plans on a very individualized level. So for example, you've got your traditional segmentation of demographics, the location of the fan base, but you can start ingesting other sources of data like social media. You start pulling in through Facebook, for example, starting to look at their other interests and see how it can tie in and weave into your product on the field. So just to elaborate further, this is where machine learning algorithms come in, and bringing in more data is starting to offer tailored recommendations. Everybody here has used Amazon at some point and started to see that they're offering you products that you think you might like. Same kind of thing can apply to sports if it's done properly. For example, a ticket promotion. Instead of a team, which is still happening to this day with a lot of teams, just blanket sending you emails and letters offering you season ticket plans, why don't they track which games you go to, how many people you bring, and who the opponents are, and what days of the week you come? So if you're a Bulls fan, and a few years ago you were coming to all of the Heat games, and now you come to all of the Cavaliers games, good chances you're following LeBron James. So why don't we offer you a ticket plan so that you're more likely to come and visit the stadium when he comes into town? Or let's say you're always purchasing tickets in groups of 6 or 8 or more. Maybe you're bringing your family, maybe you're doing a business event. Why don't we reach out to you and offer you upgrades, put you in a suite, take care of you, and make you a more loyal fan? And then there's the idea of churn mitigation. In the banking and telecommunications industry, a 1% drop in their customer base means hundreds of millions of dollars of lost revenue. The same applies to sports. If the front office is making decisions that are negatively impacting the fan base, that has major damage to revenue. And so some of the methods that you can use is target children, make them fans early, make them lifelong fans. Understand brand sentiment, voice of the customer. Start ingesting data, plug into a Twitter API, plug into Facebook, and start seeing what fans are saying and bringing it in real time so that you can address those issues. So just to expand on this further, go back for a second here. This is a pretty standard segmentation model, bringing in age, gender, you understand their purchase history, their average spend, you've stored their billing history. But there's the potential to store so much more data if you open your eyes to the ability of how it can impact the way to market to people. So I brought this segmentation traditional right here. But let's think about the rise of mobile devices. Let's try to have them use an app. It makes a handshake with the phone. You're able to pick up a lot more information about the user, how they're interacting with your content. You can start ingesting customer survey data, clickstream info about how people are interacting with your website. The list goes on. Let's talk about the in-stadium fan experience and some of the exciting things that are happening there. There's a company called Wait Time right now. It's really cool. I can't wait until they put this in Dodger Stadium. They are working with teams now to measure the length of the line in the concession stand and the length of the line in the bathroom, and be able to direct you if you've got the app and say, look, you're in this section, there's a long line over here for the bathroom, but if you go 2 sections down, it's short. And then the concession stand for beer has a short line, why don't you go over there? And if they know that generally you go to get food after the first quarter, and they notice that you didn't, then they send you a notification and maybe give you a discount, $1 off. Is that pretty interesting? I would love that. That would work on me. So the idea is spend as little time in the bathroom and bathroom lines as possible, and spend more time purchasing concessions. Right? Like Kobe Bryant's last game, they set a record, like millions of dollars of merchandise at Staples Center in one day on Kobe Bryant merchandise. Let's talk about broadcast audience, because different leagues have different models of how they derive revenue, but always a major chunk of it comes with the broadcast audience. Now you're seeing major TV deals coming into play that give those teams major cash infusions. So you can look at the audience from a macro level. And this is, again, where collecting all of this data can provide you with individual insights. So you want to collect as much data as you possibly can, all the new data you can bring in, and all of the historic data too, so you can identify trends and anomalies. The ability to measure audience size directly, as much as you can, is huge. Right now, most teams rely on networks that are pulling data from Nielsen boxes that only cover maybe 5% at max of homes. So we'll touch on this in a second, why that creates a problem. So you want to be able to measure audience size in order to effectively set your price point for advertisers. So once you understand your audience from a big level, a macro level, then you also want to understand your audience on an individual basis as much as possible. So what we're seeing now with companies like DirecTV, Dish, a number of other providers, is they're capturing not only what channel you're watching, they're recording it down to the microsecond, by the way, but they're also looking at how you're interacting with the guide. How are you flipping around channels? How can we directly advertise to you within the guide based on your viewing history? How do we track your customer journey and make sure that we're feeding you relevant content based on the athletes and teams you like, the products and brands you like, and the devices that you use? And then further to drive the point home, we want to make sure that the audience is as engaged as possible. And so now we're seeing things like in-game replays as close to real time as possible that track the movement of the ball. And you're starting to incorporate sensor data that gives you more insights on what's happening in the field. If you have access to that data as a viewer, that may be more compelling than a much more bland broadcast. And the longer you're engaged, the more dollars that translates to. Now remember, now in the age of DVRs, Netflix, Hulu, sports is one of the, if not the only must-watch live form of entertainment, especially if you're watching TV. So it's a tremendous opportunity to gain advertising dollars from commercials in cases where most other people, when they're watching TV shows, are just skipping through the commercials. So we talked about collecting audience data. This is where OTT, or over-the-top broadcasting, has become extremely attractive. By offering a streaming website service or an app that your fans can engage directly with your content, not only do you have a direct measurement of your audience size, you know exactly how they're engaging with your content. You can start serving them e-commerce, ability to purchase within the app, within the website, based on their individual preferences. You can also look at video performance, diagnostic health, making sure that you're ingesting all of the log data so that your broadcast feed is operating at an optimal level, and making sure that you're delivering ads that are the most meaningful to that audience. If you can prove to advertisers that you're hitting their direct audience correctly, you can charge a premium up to 3 to 4 times more than a traditional segmentation model. Let's talk about video analytics. I put up here stats, sports view technology. I know we've got a few stats people here. I don't know if some of you know this, but Chicago has become one of the, if not the sports technology capital of the world. There's amazing companies here that are doing technological advances in the sports arena. Stats has their sport view technology installed in every NBA arena right now. And so they're able to, through cameras installed around the arena, track individual player movements, translate that into data, actionable data that teams can use to improve their performance, the plays that they write. But when you think about video, think about, especially if it's high resolution video, and now we're getting into 4K and 5K, and you want to store it, you need a scalable storage solution. It's a massive amount of data to collect. But you want to collect that data because if you're a data scientist, you want to be able to refine your algorithms. You need to have as many data points as you possibly can in order to maximize your value and refine your algorithm. IoT, popular buzzword. And we talked about video analytics, now we're talking about IoT. This is all about digitizing the physical world and gaining as many insights as we possibly can. Now you can translate sports into video games, for example, right? They have the distinct advantage in that everything is digital, right? So we work with Blizzard. They're collecting unbelievable amounts of data. It's all already at their fingertips because it's all digital. But you want to be able to perform the same kinds of analytics with players on the field. And now we're seeing that accomplished through companies like Zebra Technologies, another Chicago company, or embedding sensors in football pads, for example, with RFID chips for location tracking, plus accelerometers. So they're tracking the explosiveness now of a player, how quickly they accelerate, if they're making a collision with another player, how many times are they colliding with the player and what's their susceptibility to concussions. They're tracking sleep now. And the future lies in, and this is starting to happen in the medical field, and it's not going to be too long away before it starts applying to sports, but let's say you have a patch that's measuring your hormone levels, your glucose levels. You get a real detailed insight of your players so you can create an individualized plan for all of them rather than a blanket workout strategy for all of them. Now, if you're a fan of sports, you've seen statistic lines like this. If you collected baseball or basketball cards, it's full of data like this. It's what we would call structured data. It's very rigid. Typically fits within what we would call a SQL database, which roughly translated, I mean, you could think of Excel as a type of SQL database. There's only certain types of values that you can store in it. And the statistics that are being kept typically are more record-based, meaning runs scored, points scored, fouls. It doesn't go very deep into how those things were accomplished. And they're not always the most accurate measure of an athlete's performance. So something that's happening that's more advanced now, MLB Advanced Media is one of the most advanced media companies in the world. They're doing amazing things with the content for Major League Baseball. Now through video analytics, they're also able to measure spin rate. So how fast is the spin on a curveball? How tight is it? Measure that effectiveness. And then there's not only velocity, so as a pitcher throwing 90, 95, 100 miles an hour, but where is his release point relative to the mound so that you can measure the perceived velocity. So if a pitcher has a great deal of extension, they're coming way out here, and they're throwing 92, 93 miles an hour, the perceived velocity might be 96, 97. So you as a coach might take a look at that and say, okay, how do we adjust this player's mechanics so that he can gain an even greater competitive advantage? Now, I took this screenshot last night. I'm a baseball junkie. Mike Stanton, who here has heard of Mike Stanton on the Miami Marlins? Got a bunch of hands. Dude can crush, right? I mean, he is so freaking strong. He hit a home run last night, the longest one of the season, 475 feet. Think about that. That's a football field and another almost half. And so what's really cool, it's another piece of engagement, is now they're showing the fans what was the exit velocity. 112.8 is insane, by the way. The launch angle, so what's the trajectory of the ball? And then they're extrapolating the projected distance. In this case, the video is not quite clear, but I'm pretty sure that he hit it completely out of the park, like way over the bleachers and out. So as a fan, especially a fan that's has any kind of interest in data, that's a fun talking point. That's something that's interesting and engaging. Touch on fantasy sports real quick. Just like we were talking about baseball cards, basketball cards as kids growing up and reading the statistics on the back of the card. Now fantasy sports has brought sports analytics to the everyday guy, right? How many here are in a fantasy football, fantasy basketball? Come on. Don't be shy. Wear it with the badge of pride. Did you guys not do well in your league or something? Who won their league? Who won the league? All right. Nice. Now, Yahoo and ESPN have very popular fantasy sites, and now we're looking at companies like DraftKings and FanDuel that are offering daily fantasy. And they've got all these commercials about how much money you could win in one day, thousands of dollars. But who do you think is really winning these daily fantasy sports? It's usually data scientists. It's people that have actually quit their jobs and they're poring over all of this data and they're trying to do regression algorithms and things like that in order to figure out how to be extremely competitive and beat the system. 99% of players that play these fantasy sports don't make any kind of meaningful money. They usually lose money. We're starting to see artificial intelligence even presently start to penetrate the sports and entertainment market. Who here heard about this thing with Google DeepMind about the game Go? Right? And I think a lot of you heard about or saw IBM Watson playing Jeopardy, right? So they're doing things like natural language processing in the case of Watson, and in the case of Google DeepMind playing Go, which is apparently a much more sophisticated game than chess. They're very good at turn-based strategy games. The reason this guy lost, he's the world champion, is because Go figured out, or no, DeepMind figured out that the way to throw him off is to pull a move that nobody would possibly think of very early on in the round, and it rattled him the entire rest of the match. It totally blew his mind that it would pull that kind of move, and DeepMind ended up winning. I mean, that's the really interesting thing about artificial intelligence. So, how is data going to transform sports in the future? We talked about IoT. IoT across any marketplace is driving just an unbelievable explosion of data. We're about halfway through the decade between 2010 and 2020. We talked about structured data versus unstructured data. Right now, we're right at the beginning of the curve. Structured data, again, being something that fits nice and tidy into a database, very defined data, whereas unstructured data contains things like telemetry and location, the accelerometers, unstructured text, things like that. And it is blowing up. And if you're in the sports marketplace and you're not taking advantage of this, you are missing out. You can be extremely effective if you're taking advantage of every data point you possibly can, which again requires a highly scalable solution that can also process that data very efficiently. Just another quick slide on just the explosion of data. In fact, I kind of disagree with this slide because this yellow band talks about connected cars. Huge, huge piece. Wearables, smart TVs, tablets, smartphones, but more and more devices are connected to the internet now and spitting out data. We look at the disruption of the IoT industry with various verticals throughout the country and throughout the world. Sports isn't mentioned here, except for maybe media and broadcast kind of falls into line with that. But believe me, it's already starting to disrupt the sports world. Give you an example of product-driven or data-driven insights into product. GoPro is one of our favorite customers. Did you know that the GoPro cameras are spitting out data? They're part of the IoT, so every time you use their camera, they know how you're using it. So they found out, just by ingesting all of this data, that even though GoPro is typically thought of as a video device, almost half the usage was pictures. Right? That surprised me, and that definitely surprised them. So they started optimizing their product to make sure that the photo experience was just as good as the video experience. This can affect products that you use in the sports arena for sure. These companies like Zebra and Catapult and Stats. Collecting the data on the usage of the device itself is just as important as the insights that you gain from how they're applied. Talked about connected cars for a second. Here's a quick diagram of a way that you might collect this data. I'm not going to dive too deep into it. But we think of connected cars for our personal vehicles. Think about Formula One and NASCAR and how much data they could possibly collect on all of their sensors and gain insights on real time how the vehicle is performing beyond what the driver is just reporting based on what they feel on the steering wheel and the pedals. What's really interesting about how you can collect this data as well is whether it's racing or just in general commercial use, they can say, you know what, that particular part or subcomponent keeps failing over and over. We need to talk to that supplier and have them make sure that they're improving their quality, or we're going to turn over to another supplier. Maybe we can negotiate a better deal. One of my favorite applications that I've learned about now with the connected cars movement, these cars don't just have one computer chip anymore. They've got like 5 or 6. And so they're detecting what's happening with the parts and proactively looking for failure within the vehicle. And then notifying the driver, hey, your brakes are about to go out. There's a dealership 5 miles away. Joe is available. He's one of our service technicians. There's a bay open. Why don't you go swing by over there? We'll take care of you in 15 minutes. What do you think that does to customer loyalty? More than half the revenue of an automotive dealership is made not through the sale of the car, but through aftermarket parts sales. Information security is majorly important. You know, we're seeing a lot of that come out with recent events such as Edward Snowden, the San Bernardino shooters. You can imagine for the banking and insurance industries and health industries, the privacy of their customers' information is paramount. The amount of data that's being collected is very much vulnerable to attack from people like hacktivists, for example, anonymous, right? Or it could be insiders, could be criminals, terrorists. It could be used for social change in a good way or bad, theft, sabotage, extortion. It's very, very disruptive. So how would that apply to sports? The Cardinals had, you know, as I'm sure every team does, has all of their plays and all sorts of other statistics and data that they've collected in their own internal database. You know, it was the Astros. This happened about a year ago. And one of the front office personnel left from the Astros to the Cardinals, and he put all the data into the thumb drive and brought it over, and he got caught. You can detect things like this if you're collecting data on the usage of all of your devices and controlling by role-based access who is controlling what data and how. So if you know that an employee is about to leave within the next 4 weeks, you better darn well be tracking what his activities are with your machines. And you could proactively start detecting, okay, something's about to go down. This is one of my favorite images. Who's this guy? Sepp Blatter, right? We have soccer fans in the house. European football, sorry. Same kind of thing. If you're collecting data on how money is being moved around within the league, within the teams, assuming you've got some innocent, morally conscious people within your organization, which I doubt FIFA has. But if they did, they'd be able to detect that there's some serious corruption going on. Same kind of thing applies to match fixing, which happens quite a bit in European football, happens in tennis too. This can all be captured with data if you're learning how to detect it properly. And then there's things like collecting data in order to detect trends and anomalies and the likelihood that somebody is going to take performance-enhancing drugs, their propensity for criminal activity, and their likelihood to commit that offense again if they get caught the first time. You know, athletes respond to incentives. So if the incentive isn't great enough to detract them from doing something, they're going to do it. They will take PEDs, make their millions and millions of dollars. They might get suspended for 80 games, but they've already made it. How do we prevent that? Data is a big way to do it. One of the things that I really would like to see the sports industry address, because this has affected the Dodgers and the Lakers so much, is using data to keep the players on the field and to bring them back and healthy and stay healthy as soon as possible. Okay, now this can come through tracking the anatomy of players and comparing it to a baseline set, looking at what good, better, and best looks like. How the player is being used. So we see that, again, I'm a baseball guy, so the pitchers are being tracked by pitch count, right? Every time a starting pitcher gets to 100 pitches, I cringe, because that is when a coach decides that that is more or less the limit of when a starting pitcher can go. But who's to say that you and you and you all have the same physical limitation as far as how many pitches you can throw? And why are we not factoring in warm-up pitches and pitches in the bullpen and the off-season work, or how much baseball that player has played over the course of their lifetime? Did they play travel sports all year round? I did. It's the reason that I got injured early. I got overworked. So these are things that you need to be able to track. And there's not just the physical aspect, there's the mental aspect as well. How do we address the issue of concussions in the NFL? It's being addressed more and more. The more data we can ingest, the better, in order to, again, identify trends and anomalies. IoT and sensor data plays into this as well. But what about things like sports psychology? The propensity for a player to break down during a critical moment and have anxiety, or their ability to focus and block out distractions. What about what happens post-career? Talking about football players suffering from post-concussion syndrome. It's really, really sad stuff. Getting into Alzheimer's way too early. Let's use the data that we have on athletes to affect the way that we look not only at athletes, but as the general population in terms of figuring out how do we keep people healthier and how do we care for them in the long term. I personally would also like to see, and this is starting to happen, research institutes where you look specifically at how we can prevent injury, how we can apply better medicine for sports treatment. And one of my favorite topics, this is a very eye-opening book by David Epstein called The Sports Gene, talks about a person's natural ability to be great at a certain sport. There's a great story in there about a high jumper, second generation high jumper, a little bit shorter than me, practiced his whole life, and his Achilles heel, which was one of the main factors for your ability to jump high, had gotten extremely hard over time. So he had a tremendous leaping ability because he was able to store so much energy in his Achilles heel. But then a coach, a track coach, walks by a pickup basketball game and sees this guy have tremendous leaping ability and dunking balls left and right. No high jump experience at all. Look at the anatomy of what his Achilles heel looks like, and it's extremely long, which is another way to store a lot of energy. And within months, he had become champion and beat this guy that had practiced his entire life because he had a genetic propensity to be better at that sport. So what if you could look at individuals, aggregate data across all sorts of different people, and take a look at their anatomy and their genetic makeup, and start placing them into sports that they're going to be particularly ideally suited for. Maybe baseball wasn't for me, maybe crew was my thing, or archery, or God knows what. But these are the kinds of things that are possible when you aggregate a very large data set and then try to narrow it down to a tailored individual profile. We just had the NFL draft here, right? This is your Chicago Bears first round draft pick. Was he good? Yeah? You like him? Okay. So they collect all of this data, right, during the combine. They take a look at his 40-yard dash. They take a look at his leaping ability, both vertical jump and horizontal jump. This gets broadcasted. It's part of the engagement of the fan when they're watching the NFL draft, right? But one topic that is extremely interesting to me, and it's going to have to be discussed in every collective bargaining agreement moving forward, is who owns the data? After all, data is being collected on the athlete themselves. It's data that's being tracked on them. A lot of their statistics are on public record. Data is collected off of their body. Those medical records and data about themselves should belong to them, right? But then the team is involved. They're gathering data to assess that athlete's ability to be a top performer or if they're declining. They have access to the doctor's evaluations. So when a player is coming up on the end of their contract and they're looking to negotiate their next deal, chances are that data, especially if they're on the decline or they have health issues, is going to be used against them. And that team has a competitive advantage over all the other teams because they know things that the other teams don't. And then in some cases, the league owns all of the data. MLB is a perfect example. Nearly all of the data that teams collect about their players, or they collect about their stadiums and concessions and so forth, all of the media and broadcast, the website. It's all owned by MLB Advanced Media in one central data repository, and the teams and even the players, if MLB even allows them to, I don't personally know, will have to request the data from MLB Advanced Media, and they may or may not get it. Now we have Professor Tom Miller here. This is the holy grail, right, is using data science in order to predict sports outcomes. If you assemble a team of players, put together the right plays, assess all of the other teams, figure out their plays, and figure out the optimal statistical method, you should be able to win the World Series or the NBA championship, right? So I'm looking forward to when you figure out how to crack that code. But that's one of the things that makes data science fun, right? Somebody in this room is going to figure out how to do it. Feel it. Artificial intelligence is becoming more pervasive. It will become more pervasive. One of the things that I find fascinating about machine learning and artificial intelligence is, do you try to make it replicate human behavior, or do you try to remove the human element altogether and make what we would consider more rational decisions? And when you're replicating human behavior, of course, we do irrational things, or what we would think are irrational things. But when you think about it for a minute, those irrational behaviors are a consequence of many individual decisions that we make that we feel are rational at the time. So I know that if I diet and exercise, I'm going to improve my health. But sometimes a cheeseburger sounds really good, right? So it seems like a rational decision, but based on what my brain is telling me and what I desire, I'm making it what you would think is an irrational decision, but it felt rational to me at the time. So how are you going to apply that in your artificial intelligence models? Or are you going to remove that altogether? One of my favorite topics is the advent of virtual reality and augmented reality. The NBA has mandated to all of the teams, mandate's a strong word, but strongly suggested that they all look at incorporating virtual reality into their fan experience. And this can be used not only for fan experience, but for player training, right? So this guy could be 100 miles away, or maybe he's injured, but he still wants to keep his acumen up as far as his ability to perform. You know, we see quarterbacks looking at their play thing on their wristband all the time. But what if you could take it next level? This is what augmented reality looks like. That's what Google Glass is all about, right? So what if Tom Brady, who's already one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, can now have advanced statistics and have omnidirectional vision, forward and backward, to enhance his performance? This type of thing could be coming down the pipe. It's definitely something that's being worked on. I'm running short on time. I apologize. I'll whip through these a little bit faster. These are going to be gone into in more detail within the conference. But there is a better way to approach these things. I mentioned scalability and processing. It's important. The ability to combine data sources and do analytics within one central environment as opposed to in a vacuum across multiple silos is extremely crucial, and that's possible with technologies like Hadoop, plug for Cloudera. So real-time analysis, centralizing that data, doing more sophisticated visual analytics, and keeping all of that historical data in there as well. And the way you would go about this is you start with one use case and you build on top of that. So if your mandate from upper management is to drive more revenue, start with trying to collect data about that. Start gaining data that you can turn into actionable insights. Deliver value, gain confidence in your organization to use these new techniques in order to improve the business, find ways to reduce time to value, and keep iterating from there and find new use cases. We talked about building a customer 360 profile. We can talk about it more afterward if you'd like. This repeats the same thing. I'd like to share one more idea. I'm going to focus on, I'm showing Northwestern just because we're in Chicago. Okay. Okay. All right. Nice. I would love to see a future in universities, whether it's Northwestern or my alma mater, Penn, or anywhere, where the athletic department is the central hub to being a collaborative, cross-department, data-driven university, where for the first time you bring your computer scientists and folks from the engineering school and have them interact directly with the athletic department. And the reason why I highlight the athletic department is because they're usually the top, if not one of the most top-funded divisions of the university, right? They have a lot of money to spend. They could stand to hire a few analysts here and there, right? But if you incorporate the students and make them part of that activity, then you can start working with them to develop better plays, perform more advanced statistics on the players. Then you could bring in the School of Medicine, right? Biotechnology, bioengineering, medical students, rehab students. And you could have them start interacting with the athletic department and the computer engineering school in order to figure out how do we keep these players healthy, right? How do we keep them on the field? Use the athletic department as a vehicle to accomplish those studies. Put together a thesis paper. Then you could bring in the business school. You could bring in the law school to help these athletes that are looking to move on to the next level take a look at all of this data that has been collected about them and negotiate the best deal possible entering the draft. And you could bring the communication school in too. You could have the students put together a PR plan and a brand around that specific athlete. That's the vision I wanted to share with you. Again, I would encourage you, a lot of you come from a lot of different fields. There's an interest in sports analytics, interest in data science. Try to be the change. You know, bring sports and entertainment to the next level. There's use cases that are parallel to other industries that you can bring here and help teams derive a lot more value. So I thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, so we ran a little bit over on time, but we're going to have just 5 minutes to ask Alex some questions. So let's just do it on a consensus basis. We'll take a few questions. Raise your hand and, to get started. Anyone has any questions?
You handle each of the This guy raised his hand in like the second slide. He's been dying to ask me questions.
Pretty crazy about all the 4 major like that. Obviously, we have this in baseball. So obviously, like we've seen in volleyball, that's more money at what's the sports that actually manage the team statistics. Like you mentioned, for example, the home run race, 4 different errors. I think one data point that has been considered later, but wasn't considered kind of like in the 20s, was like Babe Ruth only played against like 7 teams. Yeah. So obviously the competitive advantage is different. And at the same time, when McGuire and Bond started with the PEDs, you have to understand that it was pitchers too. So yeah, whether that's competitive or not in some of these guys, it might come down to a moral question. Yeah. But at the same time, you're trying to have the highest performance. So, I don't look down upon that. I mean, you gather the data and then you make the best decision based on your organization. So I think absolutely. Those are awesome examples. Really, enlightened.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and absolutely, you know, there's sabermetric statisticians that are obsessed with this stuff. They create all sorts of adjustment models based on era, based on...
Just really quickly, everyone, we're going to stay here. We're going to push all the sessions a few minutes back. So please stick around for the Q&A, and then the timing will correspond afterwards. Sorry, go ahead, Alex.
I was just going to say, you know, they do ballpark adjustments, they do era adjustments, so that does get factored in. You know, these statistics are all a consequence of the era, but for the average fan, all they care about, with especially these milestone records, is the tally.
So how long is the war stat? It's been on for like 50 years, but people just started tracking like the last 12, right? Which is like that's what we key measures in baseball, right?
Right. And that's not only in baseball, that's in a number of, yeah. We can talk more about that later.
Do you deal with black swans in sports? So things that, you know, should not have happened but do happen, whether that's athletes or teams that succeed, but they have no reason to statistically.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sort of thing that can be absolutely tracked with data. The question was, I like the phrase, he asked about black swans, people that shouldn't perform well but do. And it's a double-edged sword, right? Like maybe that guy is juicing or something, right?
Yeah.
But there can be exceptions to the rule. People will have a career year and drop back to their mean again. It's all about collecting data. I think that if you're able to track that person's history and their anatomy and genetic makeup, that might also attribute to it, and also analyze, you know, how hard have they been practicing. You know, you might be a tremendous athlete, but you're not committing yourself to practice in the games like another athlete who's not as gifted physically, but is working a lot harder.
Like in the movie Rudy, like some personal event happens, all of a sudden they spike up, like the performance.
Exactly. You had your hand up.
Just really quickly, just for the sake of timing, I'm going to end the Q&A right now.
Sure.
So let's give Alex another round of applause. Thank you, Alex. That was really exciting, and you could feel the passion leading out of it, and I'm sure he'll stick around and answer a few more questions. I just have a few announcements before everyone leaves. All of the workshop sessions will be on the 3rd floor. There's a few scheduling changes as far as where the classrooms are. Everyone here is also registered for each session, so make sure that you use that ticket to go to the appropriate session, since all of the seats are assigned. But once you get to the 3rd floor, there's tons of signs. You'll be able to be directed to the appropriate classroom. There will be lunch at 12:30, again based on the schedule. And Alex did a great job of talking about the potential for all of the data. The workshops will tell you that the possibilities of lots of data, but be sure to come back at 4 o'clock here in this auditorium, 803, for the legalities and constraints behind big data. I'll let you guys be. Thank you.